Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're looking into some big news for Social Security. It could even have an impact on your wallet.
Oh, yeah. This is definitely something to pay attention to.
We're talking about significant payments.
Hmm.
I mean, millions of dollars going out every single day.
And it's not just a rumor or anything. This came straight from Social Security themselves.
Really?
Yeah, they announced it on their official X account. X used to be called Twitter, of course.
Right. Well, I know our listeners are probably wondering how much we're talking about here and if this is something that affects them. So let's get into the details. What kind of numbers are we looking at?
So just to give you an idea of the scale here, on February 25th, they sent out over 1,700 payments.
Wow.
And those totaled more than $12 million.
Okay, so let me grab my calculator. That's an average payment of over $7,000.
Yeah.
Now, I know not everyone's going to be receiving that exact amount, but wow, that really highlights the potential impact of this news.
Absolutely. We're not talking about spare change here. This is all thanks to the Social Security Fairness Act. That was a law passed late last year. It was implemented in January of this year, January 2025.
The Fairness Act. That's an interesting name they chose. I mean, who doesn't want fairness, right? But I'm curious who this specifically benefits and why.
Yeah, that's a great point. The Fairness Act impacts about 3.2 million beneficiaries. In the past, they saw their benefits reduced or even completely eliminated.
Really?
Yeah, and it's because of two provisions, the windfall elimination provision and the government pension offset. You might have heard of those before.
I have heard of them.
Yeah.
To be honest, though, they always seemed a little confusing to me.
Oh, yeah. They're definitely a bit complicated.
So can you break down why those provisions were initially put in place and why they might have been considered unfair to some people?
Sure. So the windfall elimination provision and the government pension offset, those were designed to prevent what lawmakers called double dipping of benefits. Does that make sense? And this mainly impacted people who worked in jobs that didn't pay into Social Security, like some public service jobs. But later they worked in jobs that did. So the idea was to adjust their benefits, to reflect their entire work history. But critics argued that this, led to reductions that weren't fair.
So the thinking behind the Fairness Act is to fix that, like an imbalance or an unintended consequence of those older provisions. How does this act actually do that? What's changed?
Well, the Fairness Act basically repeals those two provisions, the windfall elimination provision and the government pension offset. So those 3.2 million people who had their benefits reduced,
Right.
well, now they can get their full benefit.
Unreduced.
Exactly. And to make up for those past reductions, Social Security is sending out lump sum retroactive payments. Those were the ones you mentioned
Oh,
earlier.
okay, yeah. So those lump sum payments, you said they're retroactive to January 2024, right?
Yeah.
So we're not talking about just a one-time bonus here. This is catching people up for like a whole year of missed benefits.
Exactly. A whole year. And these catch-up payments, they'll keep going till the end of March. And then starting in April, those same beneficiaries will see an increase in their regular monthly checks. All thanks to the Fairness Act changes.
Okay, so let me make sure I understand this. We have 3.2 million people
Yeah.
who could be receiving thousands of dollars, like right now, in retroactive payments over the next few weeks. And then starting in April, they'll see a permanent increase in their checks going forward.
That's exactly right. It's really a significant financial boost for a lot of people, especially those who relied on those reduced benefits for so long.
It must feel pretty incredible for them to finally be receiving the full amount they earn. I am curious about the bigger picture here, though. We are talking about a lot of money being paid out.
Oh, for sure. The estimated financial impact of the Fairness Act over the next 10 years is $196 billion.
Wow. $196 billion. That's an enormous amount of money. So what are the longer-term implications of this for Social Security itself and the overall economy?
That's a great question. And it's one that a lot of economists and policymakers are asking right now. I mean, on the one hand, this could really stimulate local economies. More money for people means they can spend more. That's good for businesses.
Right.
But of course, when you're dealing with this much money, there are questions about how this will affect Social Security's funding in the long term. How do we make sure it's stable for future generations?
So there's definitely a lot to think about here, both the immediate impact on people and the long-term impact on the system itself. But before we get too far ahead, let's break down exactly who benefits from this act. I'm sure lots of our listeners are wondering if this applies to them or someone they know.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Let's do that next. So let's dive into who might actually be eligible for these benefits under the Fairness Act.
Yeah, because I'm betting a lot of people listening are like, okay, this is great, but does this apply to me?
Exactly. And the key thing to remember here is this mainly affects people who worked in jobs that didn't require them to pay Social Security taxes, at least for a certain period of time.
Okay, so we're talking about certain public service jobs, right?
Well,
Like teachers, firefighters, police officers.
you got it. A lot of those folks, especially if they worked at the state or local level, they participated in pension systems, ones that are separate from Social Security.
Hmm.
So in the past, if they then worked in a job where they did pay into Social Security, their benefits might have been reduced.
Oh, because of those two provisions we talked about.
Exactly. Because of the windfall elimination provision or the government pension offset.
It almost sounds like they were being penalized for having a diverse work history.
Well, and that was the argument from a lot of people who felt like those provisions were unfair. And that's what the Fairness Act is trying to fix. It makes sure people receive their full benefits,
Hmm.
based on how much they actually contributed. It doesn't matter if they also got a pension from a job that wasn't covered by Social Security.
So this is potentially huge for a lot of people, especially anyone nearing retirement or who's already retired and living on a fixed income.
Absolutely. Imagine suddenly receiving thousands of dollars in retroactive payments, plus a permanent increase in your benefits every month. I mean, that could really help people with expenses or even just allow them to enjoy their retirement more.
It's really a financial cushion.
Yeah.
This makes me think about my aunt. She was a teacher for years and always felt like she got a bit of a raw deal with Social Security because of her pension. I can't wait to tell her about this. She might actually be eligible.
That's great. And that's a perfect example of why it's so important to spread the word about this act. You just never know who in your life might be affected. Sharing this information could have a huge positive impact on their finances.
It really could. We talk a lot about financial literacy on this show. And this is a prime example of why it's so important to stay informed. Policies change, and those changes can really affect you.
For sure. Knowledge is power, especially when it comes to your money. So if anyone listening thinks they might fall into this category of workers who had their benefits reduced, don't wait. Reach out to Social Security directly. They can help you figure out if you're eligible and what you need to do.
That's such good advice. Even if you're not sure, it can't hurt to check right.
Absolutely. It's always better to be safe than sorry. And you might be surprised by what you learn. While we're on the topic of being proactive, this might also be a good time for everyone to think about their own retirement planning.
That's a really good point. Even if you're not directly affected by the Fairness Act, this is a good reminder that Social Security is always changing. Staying up to date is so important. It can really help you make good financial decisions for your future.
Exactly. Retirement planning isn't something you just do once and then forget about it. People need to be more involved, really understand their benefits and make a plan so they feel secure.
And that's what we're all about here at The Deep Dive. We want to give you the knowledge and tools to navigate all this stuff and to make the best choices for yourself and your family.
And sometimes those choices can have a huge payoff, like potentially receiving thousands of dollars you didn't even know you were owed.
It's amazing. In a world where everyone's worried about money, this news brings a much-needed sense of hope. Things can change for the better.
It's true. Sometimes things really do work out fairly in the end.
Speaking of fairness, I am curious to hear your thoughts on the bigger picture. We talked about the huge price tag, $196 billion, and what that means for the system as a whole. Is there anything else our listeners should be thinking about in terms of the larger economic context?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's definitely something that a lot of experts are looking into right now. Whenever we see these big changes to programs like Social Security, you have to wonder how it's all going to play out in the long run.
It's like ripples in a pond, right?
Yeah.
One change can lead to a whole bunch of other effects.
Exactly. So on the one hand, you've got the potential for this to really boost the economy. Think about it. Millions of Americans suddenly have more money. What are they going to do with it?
They're going to spend it.
Right. And that spending helps local businesses, which in turn helps support jobs and keeps the economy moving.
So it's a win-win.
Potentially, yeah. And we can't forget about the other benefits, the ones that are harder to measure. This could bring people so much peace of mind, relieve some of that financial stress, especially with the cost of living going up these days.
It's not just about the money itself. It's about what that money represents.
Yeah.
Freedom, security, the ability to actually enjoy retirement.
Exactly. But on the other hand, we also have to be realistic. Anytime you make a big change to Social Security, it raises questions about whether the program can stay afloat. Can it be sustained over time?
Especially with a price tag of $196 billion. That's just over the next 10 years. It's a lot to think about.
It is, and it's something that policymakers are definitely grappling with. But the good news is that Social Security has been around for a long time. It's adapted and changed over the years. There have been all sorts of adjustments and reforms. I think we can be confident that they'll find ways to address any funding challenges that come up.
So it's complicated, lots of different factors to consider. But I think the main takeaway for our listeners is this. The Social Security Fairness Act is a really positive development for millions of people. And while it does raise some legitimate questions about the future of Social Security, it also shows us that people are committed to making this program work for this generation and the next.
I couldn't agree more. This act is a reminder that Social Security matters. It's a safety net, and we need to keep fighting to protect it.
Well said. So as we wrap up our deep dive today, I want to leave everyone with a sense of hope and maybe even a little bit of excitement. You've heard all the ins and outs. Now it's time to take action.
If you think you might qualify for these benefits, don't wait. Contact Social Security. They can answer all your questions and help you figure out the next steps. And even if this doesn't apply to you, remember that staying informed is key. Social Security is always changing. It's part of planning for your financial future.
Absolutely. Knowledge is power, folks. So do your research. Check out the resources that are available and stay engaged. Social Security is a conversation that affects all of us.
And if you enjoyed today's deep dive, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of our future episodes. We've got some great stuff coming up. We'll be talking about retirement planning, the latest trends in investing, and much more.
We're here to help you navigate the world of finance and make smart choices for your future.
Until next time.
Keep diving deep.